We're going to take a look at how TimelinePI, the intelligent process mining solution, can be used to analyze patient throughput and overall patient stay within an emergency department use case. So each one of these horizontal lines represents a separate patient encounter in the emergency department, and the icons represent an event or activity that's happened as a part of that patient's stay. Now we can drill a bit further into just how long it's taking us to process these patients by using this duration metric. The fact that there's a patient that it looks like could be staying up to 35 days doesn't quite make sense. So let's take a look at that. By clicking on this duration metric, we're presented with a histogram which shows me all of my cases by their duration. Now I can see the minimum, the average, and the maximum closeout times for these patient encounters, and by sliding the threshold, I can take a look at how many patients have been processed in both above or below 1 day. And it looks like the majority of my patients have been captured in under 1 day, almost 98%, but still a good amount between 1 day and 35 days. So let's focus in and filter in on just those 520 that have taken longer than 1 day. So now all the data is flexed to show me metrics and representation of just these 520 long-running patients. Now, the fact that something stands out here is the last event in these patient encounters is temporary PAT is identified, signals that somebody is going back and adding something to this patient record after they've already been released from the hospital. Now what we can do is choose to break this subset of patients down, this 520 patients down, by any one of the attributes that we have in our data set. In this case, we'll break it down by the means of arrival. Now what this is showing us is that the majority of these patients which have record of being in the ED for longer than 1 day have come in via third-party transport. You can see a very large percentage via ambulance, a large number. You would expect a much smaller percentage via life flight, but this is not what you would expect. The majority of people we would expect have come in via personal vehicle. What this shows us is that these patients that are coming in via third party, we're not getting all the data that we need from these third party transports to be able to process that patient all the way through towards recording payment. So what this would signal is the need for our staff to get all that data up front, make sure we don't let that ambulance or that life flight person leave before we get all the data for the patient prior to them taking off. Now, one other consideration could be that certain events are taking too long to complete, and we're not getting things back in time. For example, maybe we're not processing lab orders as quickly as we might expect that we should. Now, by clicking on any one of our different events, for in this example the lab ordered event, we can get a distribution on exactly how commonly is this lab ordered event occurring. And we can see there are anywhere between 0 and 15 different lab orders placed as a part of these patient encounters, which is a relatively high number. We can also see some statistics around what are the most common previous and post events to the instance of a lab order, in case there's any correlation as to things that may be occurring up or downstream from this. But in this scenario, now that we know that labs are happening relatively frequently, we can get a little bit more quantitative and actually understand a bit more about how much time does it cost us each time we order a lab using the time interval mechanism. So again, based on this patient subset we're looking at, those that have taken over 1 day, what we're looking at here is the difference in time between a lab order event and the lab result. So how long does it take us to be able to get the result back from these orders? Again, you can see the minimum, the average, and the maximum turnaround time for these labs. And in seeing that the average is almost 90 minutes, having the possibility of 15 different labs being ordered would be obviously be an inordinate amount of time for a patient to be sitting and waiting to be processed for those lab results to come back. We can get even a bit more interesting here and choose to break this histogram down by any one of our different dimensions in case we're curious if there may be a certain lab that's taking longer than others that we can start to focus in on. Now, by breaking this down, we have all of our different lab tests listed here, and now it's just a visual exercise to see which one of these looks a bit skewed or different from the others. And within this use case, I'll tell you it's this APTT lab. Our general average is 87 minutes. In this example, by subbing in the APTT, it's almost 2 hours on average to get that specific test back. Now, this allows me to go have a conversation with my doctor or my physician's assistant to understand a bit more about exactly where this test is being administered and understanding why it's taking so long to be able to be processed.